The top 5 changes under the Children and Families Act, and this is an opinion, people can take a different view. First, and this I won't concede, is Section 19, undoubtedly the potential game changer in the Children and Families Act, and often quote that slide up and show you it works. And the key 5 words in Section 19 are best possible educational or other outcomes. That's 6. So it's a really key phrase to keep in mind, because it changes the nature of what local authorities are supposed to be trying to do. Anyone who's ever been near a tribunal will have heard talk of sufficient and adequate provision. But that's not what Section 19 says. Section 19 says we should be striving for the best possible outcomes across the board for all our children and young people. Now, it will be very interesting to see what the tribunal and the courts ultimately make of that duty, how much force it has. But at the very least, it's the aspiration, it's what people should be aiming for, the best for our children and young people, not just what's good enough. The 0 to 25 approach makes a real difference. There was never any sense in having a hard-edged cut-off at 18. But equally, it's not a seamless 0 to 25 system, and even in the next half hour, I'm going to show you some ways in which things change at different age stages within that process. And of course, there's still a hard-edged cut-off at 25, or whatever point the plan has apparently achieved its outcomes. So we still have a problem with transition onto adult. And certainly for social care, there is a bright line between children's services and adult services under the Care Act, although there are some transition duties under provision. So you do have to take the idea of a 0 to 25 system with a bit of a pinch of salt. The duty to provide health services under the Education Health and Care Plan is genuinely different and new. There has never been a specific duty on the NHS to provide disabled children with the health services they need, and there is now, if that provision goes in the plan. What I'm hearing is a lot of the disputes are about trying to get health provision into the plan. The EHC plan still seems to be more of an E and less of an H and a C. And that's a shame, and that means that the reforms aren't delivering their full potential. But the law is clear: if health provision is in the plan, then it absolutely must be arranged by the Clinical Commission of Group. It's the same duty as is on the local authority in relation to education. The spotlight on social care is how I've described Section H of the plan. Anyone who's seen the plan will know that it's divided now between H1 and H2. And Section H1 is about the provision that's required to be made under the Chronically Sick and Disabled Persons Act of 1970. And so I just said those words. Who had heard of the Chronically Sick and Disabled Persons Act of 1970? A handful of people in the room. It is the key duty for disabled children's social care. It's hugely misunderstood or ignored, and at the very least, the fact those words are in the plan will hopefully start some conversations about what it requires. What it basically requires is that services are provided to disabled children where it's necessary to do so. And that question about necessity is answered through an assessment under the Children Act or as part of the EHC assessment process. So that spotlight that the plan will shine on this key piece of law, I hope will help make sure the law is being complied with. And then the local offer. I was sceptical at first about the value of the local offer, but the more I think about the process of the reforms, the more I think the local offer is absolutely fundamental to it working and to the reforms being delivered. Not least because only a handful of, or a small minority of children and young people will get a plan. There should be no difference between the children who have previously got statements and those who now get plans, because the legal text is the same. But it was only ever a minority of children who got statements, and that translates through to young people as well. So we have to make sure that the new scheme, delivers for the majority of people who are not going to hit the threshold for a plan, and the local offer is the way that should work. I'll come back to local offers in a moment. So just to dwell on a few of the key points, Section 19 principles, I think we've already seen the slide, so I won't spend any time on that. The strategic duties under the Act. In the context of co-production, the forums need to be really aware of these duties. They're more important at a general level than at an individual level. So Section 25 talks about local authorities to integrate their education, health and social care provision with the commissioning group, of course. And Section 26 requires specific joint commissioning arrangements with the political commissioning group to be in place. Section 27, I think, is particularly important because it, for the first time, tells local authorities they've got to keep their education and care provision under review. And as part of that duty, they've got to consider whether the provision is sufficient to meet local needs. And that requires them to understand what the needs are, so how many children and young people there are in the area, what the provision is, which you should match with the local offer, and whether that's enough. And if there are any gaps, something will have to be done about it. So I think Section 27 is going to be a key tool in the process of co-production between local authorities and forums. And then more duties around cooperation in Section 28, 29, 31. The law is clearly saying to the state bodies, join yourselves up and make sure that families get a seamless service. Don't argue between different agencies about these matters. We shall see. Just a word about support in school. Really powerful messages that came through earlier about how important schools are in this process. And most of the legal duties, as always, are on the local authority. But schools do have key duties as well. And the one to highlight is the governance duty in Section 66, which says that the school governors, the vast majority of types of school, have to use their best endeavours to make sure that the special educational provision that children require is made for them, regardless of whether they've got funding. So the legal body with responsibility for making sure that children's SEN is met, in the first instance, is the school governors. And those are the people you should talk to when you think things aren't going well, after you've spoken to the secretary. So the governors have a key role in this system. And really, it's if this SEN support cycle isn't delivering for children, that you'd expect there to then be an education health care plan in place, other than perhaps in the most complex cases. So schools are the starting point. And that Section 66 duty is really important. And if you're trying to understand how this new system works, part of the problem is you can't just look at the Children and Families Act, because the Children and Families Act is essentially an education act with health and social care involved. And you need to understand the existing law on social care, so Section 17 of the Children Act, and the new guidance. Since I produced this slide, Working Together to Safeguard Children has been reissued. So we've got the 2015 version of the guidance, said very similar things. Assessments that need to be completed with fixed time frames, immediate responses in urgent cases, and the requirement for children that need to have a plan that sets out the social care support they're going to get. And of course, all disabled children are children in need under the children, a message that sometimes gets lost. So that's the social care scheme in a couple of sentences. For health, the key document is the National Framework for Children and Young People's Continuing Health Care, which is guidance that applies to children and young people who have, quote, complex health needs. But that can include behaviour. It can include other things that are more obviously health, around skin integrity, breathing and so on. It can also include children with complex behavioural needs. And those children should get a joint package of care where the clinical commissioning group takes the lead, not the local authority. And the guidance has some very tight time frames that have to be followed in most cases. So it's a problem with the Act that it isn't a complete scheme. And you have to understand other bits of law if you're going to want to make sense of your family's rights and entitlements. And to help with that, we're rewriting the Disabled Children Legal Handbook at the moment, and that will be freely available on the Council for Disabled Children website, hopefully sometime after the summer. So what have the challenges been? Now, this is very much an overview from what I've seen going around the country through social media and so on. Certainly the local offer has been really challenging. The time frame that was given to local authorities to implement it wasn't very long, and the requirements are really onerous as well. When you look at the regulations, and I would say, if you're interested in this area, do just look at the law. If you Google the title of any of these bits of law, you'll find it. There's no magic in any of this. So if you Google special educational needs and disability regulations, you'll find the regulations. And in Schedule 2, right at the end, you'll see a very long list, 23 paragraphs, that sets out all the requirements of the local offer. And in short, the local offer has to include everything. It has to include every type of service that a disabled child or young person could be likely to want to use. And it must also include, very importantly, any eligibility criteria for accessing those services. So the whole point of the local offer is that things should be clear and transparent, and everyone should understand what they can access and how they're going to be able to access it. So there's only been one case so far on the new system, and it's a case I'm involved in, so I have to be very careful. I can't give any opinion about it. I'm just going to tell you the facts of what actually happened, and it's also going on appeal, so even more reason why I need to be very discreet as to what I say. It's a case against Warwickshire Council, brought by two children with benefit of legal aid. Very important message, legal aid is still available in this area. And there were 5 grounds of challenge in that case, all about the way in which Warwickshire were reducing their budget for saving children's services and reconfiguring the services. And the one to focus on here was ground D. And again, if you just Google the title, you'll get a link to the judgment. You can read these paragraphs for yourself. But what the judge found was that the local offer Warwickshire had put up, which they were consulting on, was deficient, was the word he used. And the way that he reached that conclusion was that the claimant solicitor put a table together that showed that across those 23 paragraphs, there were 16 of them where there was either no information or clearly insufficient information. That evidence wasn't contested. So it's an example of a local offer that was up there, but which the court said didn't come close, frankly, to meeting the legal requirements. The quote the judge gave was a considerable distance short of the statutory requirements. And I think that judgment has caused many local authorities to review what they're doing with their local office and try and bring them closer to what the regulations require. So the basic requirement of all local offers is to make sure that information in the schedule is there, but it's absolutely essential we don't lose sight of the second requirement, which is set out very clearly in the Code of Practice at paragraph 4.2. And that requirement is that local offers should make provision more responsive to local needs and aspirations. So there's supposed to be a feedback loop, a way that parents can feedback to the local authority. It's not just about whether they like the way the local authority presents it, but about the services. Are they good enough? Are there enough of them? And the way you do that is through the comments duty in Regulation 56 of the regulations, which requires local authorities to take comments on the local offer and publish them annually in an anonymised form. And so annually will be, of course, September this year for the first set, last September. Now, you mustn't use the local offer comments facility either to make complaints about your own case or to say anything that's vexatious. So you can't say the local authority are a bunch of XXX, but you can say these services are terrible, because that's a genuine comment on the services. So use the comments facility wisely, but the local authority should already be looking at the comments, given that they have to publish them in September. There should be a way already that people can feed back on the local offer. So the second big challenge I think people in the room will most definitely be aware of if they've started this process is the way of moving across from the old system to the new. System transition, rather than transition out. And every local authority is required to have its own local transition plan in place, which you should be able to access. It should be part of the local offer. And that should set out who's going to move from the old to the new system, which time, so you can see this again, a transparent process. And what's caused a lot of confusion is what should that process look like? And there have been some reports of essentially a very quick review meeting where the statement is just rewritten into Education, Health and Care Plan 4. I'm very clear that's not good enough. The department is also made clear that's not good enough. I sent a circular letter to all local authorities to say that an EHC transfer is an assessment under the new scheme. And that means that there should be new advice sought from all the people who have set out Regulation 6, including social care and health, unless everyone agrees that that's not necessary. And one of the people who has to agree that it's not necessary is the parent. So parents can require there to be a proper assessment process in a transfer case. And I would say, why wouldn't you do that? Because there's two problems with using the old advice. First is that it's old, and it may well be very old, depending on when the statements are probably kept up to date. And the second is that it's unlikely to have focused on outcomes, because bizarrely there was no duty to advise on outcomes under the laws. So unless you're very happy with the advice that you've got, my question to parents would be, why would you not want the process to become proper? And that creates a huge problem in terms of timeframes and resources for local authorities. And my best guess is that the next government will extend it. So at the moment, everyone's got to transfer by 2018, but I think that's going to go back. It's a guess, a personal view. The only reason that the deadline won't have to go back is if things aren't done properly. And I'd rather see them done properly than quickly. Because what's the point of changing the title of the document from statement to education document? So we shall watch this space. But what I would say is that if there is a situation where a transfer isn't being done properly as the parents would see it, then advice should definitely be taken. Because of all the discussion on social media that I'm seeing, this is a big problem that's coming up. And then the next problem is, well, once you've got the EHC plan, is it really a joined up approach? So issues with health, getting was originally in the plan in the first place, issues with social care, real confusion about what's required under the 1970 Act, different entitlements to direct payments, depending on whether it's a social care direct payment or an education direct payment or a health direct payment. Another issue that's coming up a lot is a request for advice from social care coming back with child not known to social care. And I just don't see how that can be right either, because a request for advice from social care must constitute a referral under working together. And so if the child's not known to social care at the point of the request, they are once the request has been made. And unless the parents object, then surely an assessment needs to be carried out. That's just a personal view, but again, it seems to be a common thing that social care isn't fully engaging in the EHC assessment process. And of course, there's no appeal right. What greater sign could you want that this isn't a fully joined up system is the fact that you can only appeal to the tribunal in relation to the education aspects of your plan, not the health and social care aspects, so that's being applied. So the only remedy for health and social care is judicial review, which is a challenging prospect. Legal aid is available, but it's not always easy to obtain. There's only a few specialist solicitors that can help in that area. And it doesn't give you the accessible access to justice that the tribunal is supposed to give. So that's a real problem as well.
Excuse me, sorry for bothering you. Can I ask, if we've already got a process of appeal through the system for the education side of it, then obviously if the child's struggling mentally, that means they're struggling with their actual health, with the inability to educate, to take on board or process. So surely would that not be of apparent reason to go down to challenge them on that line of the appeals process, because it is affecting the child's health?
One of the things, I think we're supposed to be taking questions at the end. But I'll deal with that one, and then I think the idea is we'll have a panel at the end. If we've got time. Well, I won't be too much time. One of the challenges with a joined up system is working out what provision is. Is it education, health, or social care provision? And there's a very clear rule that if provision is educating or training the child, then it's educational, no matter where it comes from. And that's generally there to deal with therapy provision. But there's no hard and fast line there. The courts have always refused to define what educational means. It means whatever educates the child. So there may well be some boundary arguments about whether something is education, health, or social care, which bit of the plan it goes in. And of course that matters for a number of reasons, not least that if it's educational, you can appeal. So you can also appeal on the basis that it should be educational and it's not in education. These issues need to be worked out in the individual. Okay, so that's a huge gallop through the Children and Families Act. I do hope there is time for some questions and discussion. On the Care Act, a 5-minute summary of what you'll get an hour and a half of if you come to the afternoon workshop. Really important duties around transition from children to adult social care. So there are 3 new types of assessment that have been created as of today. A child's needs assessment, a child's carer's assessment, and a young carer's assessment. And they all are about people moving from children's to adult services. There's also a very important new duty in Section 66, or a series of duties, that say that children's services have to continue until the adult services decisions are finally taken. And I don't see any backstop on that. So if adult services never get their act together, then children's services will need to keep providing forever, essentially. So that should help focus minds and make sure that there's no cliff edge at 18, so that children's social care services can continue post-18, and indeed must until the adults' decisions are taken. So this one, carers, absolutely central part of the Care Act scheme is that for the first time, parent carers and other family carers of over 18s will have a right to services. Up until now, carers had a right to an assessment, but no clear legal right to services. Now, if you're a family carer of an over 18 and you meet the eligibility criteria, you will have a right, of course, to services and support. So that's a huge change as well, which I'll talk much more about this afternoon. We've got new national eligibility criteria for adult care. I've written a blog post about this if people want to look at this in more detail. And the government's view is this is about the same level as substantial. People who know about adult care will know about critical, substantial, moderate and low bands. Most local authorities already meet substantial needs, so the idea is this won't change that much. But the way I read the new national criteria is they're quite a lot lower than substantial. I think more people will be eligible under the Care Act than have been eligible for social care up to date as adults. So we'll just have to watch the space and see if that's right. Charging. One of the most important parts of the Care Act, particularly for older people, is going to be this new cap on care costs. We suggested at the moment that the basic principle will be no one will pay more than £72,000 for their lifetime of care. But within the consultation on charging, which I think is just about to finish, there's a very interesting suggestion that anyone who reaches the age of 25 with an eligible need will never be charged. So if you've got a disabled young person who's been disabled from birth and they turn 18 and they have eligible needs, they will get free care for their entire life, no matter how much money they make them to have. So that's hugely beneficial for families. I'm slightly concerned about what that would mean for local authority budgets and whether that's been fully costed. That may be something that needs to be represented to government, but it's hugely beneficial for young people moving into adulthood. And it would mean that the distinction between whether you get your care from the local authority or from the NHS becomes much less important. Because at the moment, NHS care is free of charge. Local authority care is almost always chargeable. But that distinction will disappear if the Care Act charging scheme comes in next year, as it's supposed to in April 2016. Advocacy. Really excited about the advocacy rights. I think when I blogged yesterday about the best 5 things of the Care Act, it was number 2. It is central to the new scheme that people will have a right to an advocate throughout the care and support planning process. And that's both disabled people and carers as well, if they've got a substantial difficulty in engaging in the process and there's no one else appropriate to help them. So there'll be independent advocates with the team to be able to really genuinely represent disabled people and carers. And then parent carers needs assessments, introduced not under the Care Act but under Section 97 of the Children and Families Act. And the big question, which the next couple of slides answer, is what does this add to existing law? We'll move on to that. So Section 97 comes into force today and inserts new sections 17ZD to ZF into the Children Act 1989. The alphabet soup around Section 17 just gets worse and worse. And what it does, Section 17ZD, is tell local authorities they must assess the needs of parent carers of disabled children, either on request or where there's the appearance of need. So it's a very, very low threshold. All parent carers will be entitled to one of these assessments at least year. And in doing that assessment, the local authority has to have regard to the well-being of the parent carer and the need to promote the welfare of the disabled child. These assessments can be joined up, most obviously with a child in need assessment, if everyone agrees. And although there's a power to make regulations, the government hasn't chosen to exercise that power, so there's nothing more to help you as to how this works than the Act itself in Section 97. Move on. Big question. Is there a new duty to provide services to parent carers? Does the Care Act carers' duty translate across to parent carers from under 18s? Answer, no, in short. What Section 17ZF requires is consideration by the local authority of the outcome of the parent carers' needs assessment. And what they've particularly got to consider is, does the parent carer have needs for support in relation to their caring role? Does the disabled child have needs for support? Can any of those needs be satisfied by services under Section 17 of the Children Act? And then the decision is whether or not to provide any such services. So they've got to make a decision. There's a duty to make a decision, but there isn't a duty to provide services. Certainly not a new duty. So problems, move on, with the PCF. There's an overlap with the existing carers' duty, and the government alighted upon what Luke Clements has called the grandparent problem. Of course, parent carers' needs assessments only applies to parent carers. What about grandparent carers or other carers? So the old Carers Act duty remains in force to capture grandparents and other carers. So there's a real confusion. There's already a duty under the Children Act to do holistic assessments of disabled children, which means that the family's needs should be taken into account. There's only a general duty under Section 17 of the Children Act to provide services. You don't have a right to a service as a child. And what the PCNA duty doesn't do is link to the Chronically Sick and Disabled Persons Act, the 1970 Act, which is the duty to provide services to disabled children. So that's all really complicated, and I'm sorry to go through it at great speed. But the problem, what it shows, I think, this slide alone, is how, or the last slide alone, to go back, how complicated this scheme still is. And what the government's doing, or Parliament is doing, is sort of building blocks on top of one another to try and tackle particular problems without what's probably needed, which is a clear reform of the whole system, certainly around social care. Okay, very briefly on the cuts. Another slide that shows how complicated the law is, because one of the questions I'm often asked is there a right to short breaks for disabled children? Shouldn't that be a straightforward question to answer? But to try and piece together that right, I have to look at loads of different bits of law, starting with the 1970 Act, short breaks at home, short breaks in the community can be obtained under the 1970 Act. The one type of break you can't get under that Act is residential, which is a problem. So all other breaks will be provided under the Children Act, under Section 17, and the new duty that we got through the campaigning through Every Disabled Child Matters is to provide short break services to assist individuals who provide care for children to continue to do so or to do so more effectively by giving breaks. And under that duty we've got some regulations, the Breaks and Carers for Disabled Children regulations, which I'll show you. And then as part of the scheme as a whole, you've got the safeguarding duties under Section 11, Children Act 2004, and always keep in mind Section 19 of the new Act, the best possible outcomes. That's what all decisions should be aimed at. It's only got 3 regulations, there's 5 in total, 3 that matter. Regulation 3 tells local authorities to focus on parent carers' needs, undertake education, training or regular leisure activity, meet the needs of other children in the family more effectively, or carry out day-to-day household tasks. That's what short breaks are supposed to let you do. What's missing from that list is work, obviously. And the reason work is missing is that work should be supported by childcare. And there are duties to provide childcare for parents generally, and particularly for parents of disabled children, which again is multiple. So short breaks shouldn't be supporting people to work, it should be supporting parents to do everything else that's associated with the orderly lives. Regulation 4 then imposed the duty on local authorities to provide, so far as is reasonably practicable, a range of services sufficient to assist carers. Now, of course, reasonably practicable means they can take account of their budgets. But it doesn't just mean they can say, we've got no money, so game over. We've got to do whatever is reasonably practicable. And the services that have to be available in every area are daytime short breaks, overnight short breaks, educational or leisure activities outside the home, and services for the evening, weekends, and school holidays. So that's the menu of short breaks that has to be available. And in Regulation 5, there's a duty to publish this menu in a short break services statement, which again should be part of the local authority. That statement has to cover a range of services, any eligibility criteria, and importantly, how the services is designed, the range of services is designed to meet the needs of the carers in the area. All of that needs to be online with the local authority. So that's some thoughts on the law around short breaks. In terms of school transport, I haven't got the time to do this properly, but I'll just give you some headlines. There are different rights to school transport depending on how old the child is. And the best right you can have is that as an eligible child, you will be aged 5 to 15, and there is then a duty to provide free, suitable school transport to that child, and if any of the factors in Schedule 35B applies. Now these are all bits of the Education Act 1996. We've changed out this slide. Sorry, so this is the sections and schedules to the Education Act 1996. And in short, you're an eligible child if you live outside the statutory walking distance, which is 3 miles or 2 miles, and you're going to the nearest suitable school. Or if you live closer to school, but you can't reasonably be expected to walk there. So there's 2 ways to register. And if you are eligible, then you've got a right to free suitable transport. The problem, though, is that children under 5, or children who are 16 or 17, can't be eligible. They're outside of the age range. And so there's power to provide those children with transport, but they can be charged for it. Particularly the problem for 16 and 17-year-olds. Although the post-16 transport policy statement and the duties around that make clear that local authorities have to deal with that issue and say how they're going to meet the needs of 16 and 17-year-old learners with learning difficulties. And then bizarrely, for over 18s, there's then a duty again to provide transport where it's necessary, and that has to be free. So the scheme on school transport has just not caught up at all with the idea of the 0 to 25 system under the Children and Families Act. So, in conclusion, both the acts give us huge opportunities to make the world a better place for disabled children and people. There's a saying that any significant bit of legislation will give rise to 10 years of litigation. So I'm going to be busy for the next 10 years. I've got 2 bits of legislation to work with. But I hope not just 10 years of litigation, I hope what there is 10 years of practice and development and working together to make these ideas real. But it will take that kind of time. These are once-in-a-generation changes. I would be very surprised if the next government does anything as significant as what we've seen under the Children and Families Act and the Care Act. They need time to get down. It is very difficult to change the system when you've cut funding. And that is a reality that local authorities are, I'm sure, very conscious of, and which we have to deal with and try and work with local authorities to support. And that's why compliance with the spirit of the law must be as important as getting the details right. If you're co-producing with services, if you're genuinely working in partnerships with the parent forum, I think local authorities will go a long way without necessarily meeting every dot and comma of the regulation. On the other hand, if you've not got that relationship in place, then local authorities shouldn't be surprised if the forums are challenging procedural and technical breaches as they go through. And so it is the partnership, it is working together that's going to make a difference. I really hope that. In the next few slides, I've listed the blog posts, so you won't be able to capture all these. What I would say is, if you're interested in any of the things I've talked about today, if you Google Rights in Reality, which is the title of the blog, Rights in Reality is one word, and then the name of any of these posts that are coming up. So the local offer, social care, judicial review, if you want to know about the process, school transport, childcare, something I haven't even touched on today. And then the most recent posts I've written over the last couple of days have all been about issues around the care act. And hopefully that will be a good resource. Or, like I know a number of people in the room, you can follow me on Twitter as well, because I'm constantly tweeting about this stuff. So, thanks very much for having me today. I'm looking forward to doing a much more detailed session on the Care Act this afternoon for those who are interested in moving into adult social care. And hopefully we've got some questions.
Well, we're just going to let the workshops go.